US President Donald Trump said negotiations had made tremendous progress after the first day of indirect peace talks between Israel and Hamas. It's the closest both sides have come to a deal, but there are several key sticking points. Joining us now from London is Yossi Mekelberg, Associate Fellow at Chatham House and a lecturer at Roehampton University. Firstly, what do we know so far around day one of the indirect talks in Egypt between Israel and Hamas?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I think the most important thing that there are actually negotiations, because negotiations stalled for quite some time. So the very fact that both, though they are not talking to each other directly, the very fact that there are indirect talks through mediators and they're dealing with some of the core issues, for instance, the return of the hostages, the timing of the return of the hostages, the end of war, to what lines the IDF would withdraw, release of Palestinian prisoners. So, I mean, we can't take what Trump says at face value, that there is tremendous, because he's using quite freely these kind of exaggerations. But the fact that they are still there and still talking indicates that there is some progress done there.
Now, Yossi, let's go to the hostages, because the focus of the talks is a hostage for prisoners swap proposed by the Trump administration. Now, are you optimistic about Netanyahu committing to the release of some prisoners jailed for life in Israel?
I think this is one of the difficult issues for Netanyahu and for Israel, because there is opposition to this, very strong opposition within his own coalition throughout the war. And, you know, unfortunately, in very different to the ethos in the Israeli society of releasing prisoners, even those who were sentenced for life for basically murdering or terrorist attack that ended in the killing of many Israelis, the ethos for the release of hostages, it's worthy. It's very part of what makes the Israeli society resilient. And this government changed it. And the ultra-right in this already actually prepared to sacrifice the hostages for not releasing the prisoners. I think at the end of the day, there are two factors or three factors here. One, this is what most Israelis say they want, though we know that Netanyahu ignored the Israeli public opinion on this for a long time. The opposition tells Netanyahu, even if the ultra-right won't support you, we will give you the backing in such a deal. And third, at the end of the day, as we've seen in the last 8-9 days, it's how much pressure Trump is ready to put on Netanyahu that can be the deciding factor.
Now, there are commitments to Israeli pullbacks from parts of Gaza in the 20-point plan. Realistically, though, what would this look like and how fast could it be actioned?
I think it's a process, because it's not just withdrawing, you have to withdraw safely. You need to ensure that your own forces, logistically, it takes time. It's about the intention and it's about the commitment. At the end of the day, if there is no full withdrawal from Israel from Gaza, this war would continue in some form or another, probably of a guerrilla warfare. So the end process should be that Israel complete withdrawal from Gaza, and then for international forces to enter, rebuilding the PA, and eventually this would, you know, in the long term, part of a united West Bank, Gaza, Palestinian state. But for now, the importance is to set deadlines, to set procedures in which to diffuse the situation, de-escalate the situation, see how Hamas military capabilities are decommissioned, and ensuring security on both sides on the border. But the most important thing, that there are plans there with very clear deadline and targets.
Now, Yossi, what are some of the other key sticking points that will be discussed in these negotiations?
So, of course, the kind of the pace of Israel withdrawal from Gaza is a big one. How Hamas is going, what role it's going to play. Everyone's saying not going to play in the governance of Gaza. There's quite consensus also in the Arab world. But are they leaving? You know, most of the militants would leave Gaza. If they're talking about disarming. There is different ways to do that. Is disarm so decommissioning and storing this weapon? Do they need to end out the weapons, which will be more difficult for Hamas because it will be seen as being humiliated, and then moving before that to the role of the international forces there. And then we heard about the Board of Peace led by Donald Trump, and then former Prime Minister Tony Blair playing a part. Is it something that's going to be rejected or not? But a big issue is what happens when there is an agreement. To the Hamas leadership, that's tied to relevance, but also in Israeli politics, because at the end of the day, when the war comes to an end, Israeli people will demand a state investigation with the failure of October 7, which was exactly 2 years ago, horrific day in the history of Israel, that happened under Netanyahu's watch. And in any case, Israel is entering right now an election year. By next October, election must be held according to the law, and probably earlier. So it also creates momentum within the both political system into moving away from the horrific 2 years, hopefully for something better.
Now, Yossi, even as multiple countries around the world have committed to recognising Palestinian statehood, Netanyahu has reiterated his opposition to the creation of a Palestinian state. Now, does Trump's plan leave the door open for the eventual creation of a Palestinian state?
I think there is a slight opening there. In one of the last points, I think the 20th point of the plan, of talking about recognition, the aspiration of Palestinians for self-determination. This should go well beyond it into recognition of self-determination, a state. But most importantly, it's not just the recognition. It's following it up with policies and hold to account whoever put obstacles, hurdles in front of achieving a two-state solution in one modality than another. Big statements, declarations, it's all positive. I think it was a positive move of recognition, but unless the international community stay focused on making it happen, it will become not more than hollow commitment. But Netanyahu is not going to stay forever as prime minister. We'll see what the Israeli people are going to say. We'll see how much commitment also comes from the United States, not only to end the war, but to move into end of conflict and peace building.
Yossi Mekelberg there, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.